Do you remember our Down Easter video a while back? If you haven't seen it yet, make sure to check that out. A few minutes after seeing this train pass by, a freight train crossed the same railroad crossing. Let's take a look at it. Wait, does that say Pan Am? I thought Pan Am was an old airline. What's this all about? Yes, there is, or should I say was, a Pan Am Railways. And yes, this is the same Pan Am as the airline. To make it make sense, let's take a quick glance at the history of both. So perhaps my viewers born before the 1990s will remember Pan American World Airways. And if you belong to the younger generation, you may have still heard of them. Just a few years ago, there was a fictional TV show about this airline. I watched the whole thing as a teenager. It was alright. Pan Am can easily be considered as one of the most iconic airlines in world history. They were founded in 1927, flying between the US and Central and South America. Over the course of the 20th century, Pan Am flights began serving destinations all over the world, from their hubs in New York and Miami. The flagships of the Pan Am fleet were the Boeing 747s. They were actually the first company to buy them. Each plane carried the name Clipper something. Pan Am also flew flights from different parts of West Germany into the city of West Berlin, which during the Cold War were separated by communist East Germany. However, one thing Pan Am was not legally allowed to be involved in was domestic US flights, and because of this they lost many international passengers to other airlines who were able to fly people to an international hub and then overseas. Desperate for this market share, Pan Am spent a lot of money buying small airlines who would be allowed to fly these domestic feeder flights. And so their financial situation got worse. The 1973 oil crisis and the first Gulf War meant that they were facing high fuel costs with less demand. With almost $1 billion in debt, the company began downsizing en routes and staff. The world's most deadly plane accident on Tenerife in 1977 and a terrorist bombing over the Scottish town of Lockerbie in 1988 certainly can't have been good for the airline either. In 1991, they were declared bankrupt. Though different people tried to restart the airline a few times in the 90s and the 2000s, none of it lasted very long, and today we no longer have skies filled with Clippers. Now, how did we get to Pan Am Railways? Well, in the early 1980s, there were two railroads in New England that were bankrupt, the Maine Central and the Boston and Maine. A man named Timothy Mellon decided to start a transportation company named Guildford Transportation and buy these two railroads, starting with the Maine Central in 1981 and the Boston and Maine in 1983. Now, about this Mellon guy, his great-grandfather was an Irish immigrant who became a very wealthy lawyer. His son, Andrew Mellon, who you might have heard of from the Andrew Mellon Foundation, became Secretary of the Treasury during the Harding administration. He is responsible for some of the largest tax cuts for the wealthy in American history. The Mellon family naturally profited off of these tax cuts, and money went from one generation to the next. Timothy Mellon is worth an estimated $11.5 billion. Of course, realizing his family's history and his privileged position, Mellon has adopted a great sense of humility and goodwill toward... Nope, never mind. In his autobiography, he writes that social welfare programs are, quote, slavery redux. He says that the government has made black people more belligerent. Oh, so he's just a... He seems to agree with this other billionaire.
It seems like nobody wants to work these days.
And yeah, when I ride my daily 5 a.m. bus packed with people headed to their jobs, I can totally see why they'd say that.
Not.
Maybe it's just me, but when a man is born with enough money to spend $1 million to find Amelia Earhart, or $50 million to build a wall in a state he doesn't even live in, I find it hard to take his takes on poor people seriously. I'm not saying he hasn't worked hard himself, I'm just saying maybe he shouldn't be so quick to judge others. I know I tend to avoid politics in my videos, which is surprisingly hard to do since I graduated with a poli-sci degree. But when I read about this outrageous man, I felt like I couldn't just list his accomplishments without pushing back a little. I'm gonna go cool off and make myself some avocado toast. I'll be right back. To Melon's credit, without him, I wouldn't be making this video. Because thanks to him, the Maine Central and Boston and Maine became Guilford Transportation. Mellon also bought the Delaware and Hudson Railroad in 1984 for just $500,000, but by 1988 it was bankrupt and no longer part of Guilford. Canadian Pacific bought that line in 1991. Now with Pan Am, the airline, bankrupt, Mellon bought the company in 1998. Guilford Transportation became Pan Am Systems, and the railroad became Pan Am Railways. So yes, it is the very same Pan Am that once flew the Clippers. In 2008, Pan Am and Norfolk Southern began operating a line together between Rotterdam, New York, and Massachusetts. For this line, a separate subsidiary was created called Pan Am Southern. Let's briefly talk about passenger trains. Amtrak's Downeaster uses MBTA tracks until Haverhill, but north of that, it is all Pan Am trackage, all the way to Brunswick. Pan Am also dispatches some tracks in Massachusetts that it shares with Amtrak's Vermonter and Valley Flyer. Furthermore, the new Boston to Montreal overnight train, which could start running as soon as 2025, will also use Pan Am tracks for much of its journey. Now, I filmed this video in May of 2022, Pan Am's last month, because starting June 1st, 2022, Pan Am became part of the larger CSX Railroad. As part of the takeover deal, CSX had to get rid of Pan Am Southern, the line which is now operated by a separate railroad. Before I end this video, I just wanted to note that all the artwork in this video was made by my incredibly talented sister, so please show her some love in the comments. So there you have it. Pan Am Railways was absolutely a real thing, and it was related to the iconic airline of the previous century. Thanks so much for watching today. Please subscribe to Trains Are Awesome. We have a Patreon and an Instagram, so don't forget to check those out as well. See you next time.